The city of New Arcadia pulsed with life. Towering skyscrapers, their surfaces glittering with holoads, stretched far into the stratosphere. Hovercars buzzed through the air in neat, shimmering lanes. On the ground, the streets were a kaleidoscope of cultures, humans mingled with aliens of all shapes and sizes. Vendors called out in dozens of languages, offering wares from across the galaxy: luminescent fruits, gravity-defying trinkets, and even live creatures in cages that hummed with faint energy fields. 8-year-old Mia darted through the crowded marketplace, her boots kicking up tiny puffs of dust as she ran. Perched on her shoulder was Ember, her dragon. He wasn't much bigger than a large house cat, and his shimmering scales caught the neon light in a dazzling display of colors. His tail curled around Mia's neck like a protective scarf, and his bright eyes scanned the surroundings with curiosity. "Come on, Ember," Mia whispered, clutching the leash that connected to the small harness on his chest. "We've got to pick up dinner before Mom gets home." They stopped at a vendor selling exotic meats, and Mia carefully counted out credits from a worn pouch. The vendor, a squat creature with 3 eyes and skin like crinkled aluminum foil, handed her a package wrapped in bioplastic. "You're braver than you look, little one," he said, nodding at Ember. "Keeping a dragon, even a runt like that, isn't for the faint-hearted." "He's not a runt," Mia said, puffing out her chest. "He's just special." The vendor chuckled and turned to his next customer, leaving Mia to navigate her way through the bustling crowd. Ember let out a soft chirp, nuzzling her cheek as if to reassure her. She smiled. Ember had been her best friend since she found his egg 2 years ago during a school trip to the alien preserves on the outskirts of the city. No one could explain how the egg had ended up there, and the officials were all too happy to let Mia take it home. As they walked through the central Nexus Age sprawling plaza filled with gardens, fountains, and alien sculptures, a group of Tellurian teenagers caught sight of them. The Tellurians were a reptilian race with gleaming scales and long, whip-like tails. Their sharp, angular faces broke into sneering grins as they approached. "Hey, look at the tiny human and her even tinier dragon," one of them jeered, his voice dripping with derision. Another Tellurian leaned in closer, his golden eyes glinting. "Careful, little girl. Don't let him sneeze, or he might burn down your dollhouse." The others laughed, their hisses and snickers echoing in the open plaza. Mia's cheeks burned, and she tightened her grip on Ember's leash. The dragon let out a low, rumbling growl that made the Tellurians take a cautious step back. "He's not just a dragon," Mia said, her voice trembling but defiant. "And he's definitely not tiny." One of the Tellurians leaned in, smirking. "Oh? What is he, then? A handbag with wings?" Before Mia could respond, Ember reared up on her shoulder, his wings unfurling with a surprising snap. He let out a burst of flame, small but vivid, straight into the air. The crowd around them gasped and murmured, and the Tellurians stumbled back, their smug expressions replaced with wariness. "Let's go, Ember," Mia said, her voice steady now. She turned on her heel and walked away, her head held high. Ember chirped triumphantly, and Mia couldn't help but grin. As they made their way home, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that Ember was more than he appeared. His fire had grown stronger lately, and sometimes he seemed to understand her in ways no ordinary pet could. But for now, he was her Ember, her dragon, her best friend, and the one thing that made her feel special in a city teeming with wonders. That night, as Ember curled up on her pillow and she drifted to sleep, the stars outside seemed to shine just a little brighter, as if they were watching. Somewhere, far beyond the glittering skyline of New Arcadia, Dest. The annual festival of the Galactic Spectacle was a celebration of life, diversity, and creativity from all corners of the galaxy. Held in the sprawling central nexus of New Arcadia, the festival was a dizzying explosion of sound, color, and activity. Merchants from 100 planets hawked their wares, artists displayed holographic masterpieces, and performers dazzled the crowds with gravity-defying dances. For Mia, it was the highlight of the year. She wandered through the festival, her eyes wide with wonder, while Ember clung to her shoulder, his wings folded neatly against his sides. This year, however, her excitement was tempered with determination. She'd signed Ember up for the Galactic Pet Showcase, a competition where beings from across the universe displayed the talents and skills of their animal companions. "Mia, are you sure about this?" her friend Tessa asked, trailing behind her. Tessa was Mia's best friend and the only one who never teased her about Ember. The Galactic Pet Showcase is no joke. Last year, Alomari brought a telepathic phoenix that could recite poetry. Mia adjusted the strap of Ember's harness and nodded. "I'm sure. Ember's amazing, Tessa. I know he can do it." They reached the registration booth, where a bored-looking Hogarian clerk, a gelatinous being who shimmered in shades of green, handed Mia a small badge with her contestant number. "You're up in 15 minutes, the clerk said, their voice echoing faintly as if underwater. Mia took a deep breath as she entered the staging area. Around her, contestants were preparing their pets for the showcase. There was a bioluminescent cat weaving complex patterns of light, a herd of miniature robotic elephants performing synchronized dances, and even a grumpy alien warthog that could juggle knives. "Look who it is," a familiar voice sneered. Mia turned to see the Tellurian teenagers from the day before, their tall, scaly forms looming over the crowd. One of them had entered the competition with a sleek, predatory beast that looked like a cross between a panther and a Komodo dragon. Its teeth gleamed as it snarled at Ember. "You really think your little lizard stands a chance?" the leader sneered. "Wait and see," Mia shot back, her hands trembling as she pulled Ember closer. The Tellurians laughed, but Mia ignored them, focusing on Ember. She knelt down, looking him in the eye. "We can do this, Ember. I believe in you." Ember chirped softly, his eyes glowing with an unspoken promise. The showcase began with a dazzling display of talents. Each contestant stepped onto the main stage, surrounded by cheering crowds and a panel of stern-faced judges from various species. The Tellurians were up first, and their predator leaped through fiery hoops, climbed vertical walls, and roared so loudly that the audience erupted into applause. Mia swallowed hard as the announcer called her number. She stepped onto the stage, Ember perched on her shoulder. The judges looked unimpressed, and the crowd murmured skeptically. Mia took a deep breath. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ember. He may be small, but he's full of surprises." At her command, Ember spread his wings and leaped into the air. He darted through the sky like a living comet, leaving trails of shimmering light in his wake. The crowd gasped as he performed intricate loops and spins. Then came the finale. "Ready, Ember?" Mia whispered. Ember soared high above the stage, his wings glowing. He took a deep breath and exhaled a stream of multicolored flames that painted the sky with a swirling mosaic of fire and light. The audience fell silent, their eyes wide with wonder. For a moment, it seemed as though time had stopped. Then the applause began, slow at first, then thunderous. Mia beamed as Ember landed gracefully on her shoulder, his tiny chest puffed out with pride. The Tellurians watched from the sidelines, their smug expressions replaced with grudging respect. Even the judges seemed impressed, their expressions softening as they recorded their scores. After the showcase, as Mia and Ember left the stage, a tall, cloaked figure approached them. His scales gleamed like polished bronze, and his golden eyes burned with intensity. "Young one," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "Your dragon is no ordinary creature. He is Ember, the lost prince of Dracoria." Mia blinked, unsure if she'd heard him correctly. "Prince? What are you talking about?" The figure lowered his hood, revealing the regal features of a Dracorian elder. "I am Krasner, a sage of Dracoria. Your dragon is the heir to our throne. He was lost to us many years ago during the Great Conflict. You must bring him to Dracoria to reclaim his rightful place." Mia stared at Krasner, her heart pounding. Ember chirped softly, nuzzling her cheek as if to reassure her. "Me? Take him to Dracoria, she whispered. Krasner nodded gravely. The fate of our world depends on it. Mia looked down at Ember, who gazed back at her with trust and determination. She took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. Then we'll do it, she said. We'll bring him home. The shimmering portal to interstellar space closed behind them with a faint hum, leaving Mia, Ember, and Krasner aboard the Celestial Wing, a sleek Dracorian starship. The ship's walls pulsed with a faint blue light, powered by living crystals that hummed softly, almost like a heartbeat. Mia pressed her face to the observation window, marveling at the endless expanse of stars. This is amazing, she whispered. Ember, perched on her shoulder, let out an excited trill, his scales reflecting the light of a passing nebula. Krasner, seated at the helm, turned to face them. Dracoria is still several sectors away. The journey will not be easy. The galaxy has changed much since the prince was lost. There are those who would stop at nothing to prevent his return. Mia swallowed hard. Why? What do they want? The throne, Krasner said simply. Dracoria is not just a planet, it is a nexus of power. Our people control the flux crystals, which fuel many of the galaxy's greatest technologies. Without Ember, the throne remains unclaimed, and our people divided. If he fails to return, chaos will engulf Dracoria and perhaps the galaxy. Mia's hand tightened around Ember's harness. We won't fail. Krasner gave a small, approving nod. Let us hope you are right. The first sign of trouble came 3 days into their journey. The ship's sensors blared an urgent warning as a fleet of angular, black ships emerged from hyperspace. Krasner's claws danced across the control panel as the ship lurched violently to the left, dodging a barrage of plasma bolts. Pirates, he growled. They must have caught wind of the prince's journey. Mia held onto a nearby rail, her heart pounding. What do they want? Ember, Krasner said grimly. A dragon prince is worth a fortune. They would sell him to the highest bidder or worse. The pirates hailed them, their leader's face appearing on the screen. He was a scarred, insectoid alien with 6 gleaming eyes and a cruel smile. Hand over the dragon, and we might let you live. Never, Krasner snarled, closing the channel. The celestial wing darted and weaved through the onslaught, its shields glowing with every impact. Mia clutched Ember tightly, her mind racing. There has to be something we can do. Krasner hesitated, then turned to her. The flux crystals powering this ship can be weaponized, but it will take time. Can you distract them? Mia blinked. Me? How? Ember, Krasner said. He is small and fast. If you take him out on a flight pod, he can create a diversion. But it's dangerous. Mia looked at Ember, who chirped and flapped his wings, as if ready for the challenge. She nodded. We'll do it. Minutes later, Mia found herself in a tiny flight pod, Ember strapped securely to her shoulder. The cockpit was cramped, the controls alien and confusing, but Krasner's instructions echoed in her mind. Keep moving. Stay unpredictable. The pod launched into space, spinning wildly as it exited the ship's hangar. Mia gripped the controls tightly, guiding the pod toward the pirate fleet. Ember's wings flared, and he unleashed a stream of fire at one of the ships, the flames briefly obscuring their view. Nice one, Ember. Mia shouted as the pod darted through the chaos. The pirate ships turned their focus to her, firing plasma bolts that narrowly missed. Inside the celestial wing, Krasner worked frantically. Just a little longer. Outside, Mia's pod performed a daring loop around a pirate ship, narrowly avoiding a collision. Ember launched another fiery blast, hitting a fuel line and causing the ship to spin out of control. The remaining pirates hesitated, their formation breaking. Now, Krasner. Mia yelled into the comm. The celestial wing unleashed a blinding surge of energy, the flux crystal's power exploding in a wave that disabled the pirate ship's systems. The remaining vessels retreated into hyperspace, their leader snarling threats as they vanished. Mia piloted the pod back to the ship, her hands trembling. As the hangar doors closed behind her, Krasner helped her climb out, his expression stern but impressed. "You did well," he said. "The prince grows stronger because of you." Mia looked at Ember, who let out a proud chirp, and smiled. "We're a team." The rest of the journey was no less challenging. They navigated through the nebula of Fornax, where gravitational anomalies threatened to tear the ship apart, and outwitted a rogue AI system that had taken control of an abandoned space station. Through it all, Mia and Ember grew closer, their bond deepening with every obstacle they overcame. Finally, after what felt like weeks, Dracoria came into view. The planet was breathtaking. Its surface shimmered with rivers of molten crystal, and towering spires of stone and flame reached toward the sky. Mia felt a strange sense of awe and familiarity, as if Ember's memories were bleeding into her own. As they descended, Krasner's voice was heavy with emotion. "We are home. But the hardest trials are yet to come. Ember must prove himself worthy of the throne." Mia nodded, her resolve steeling. "We'll face them together." Ember let out a low, rumbling growl, his eyes gleaming with fire and determination. The journey was far from over, but Mia knew one thing for certain: they had come too far to turn back now. Dracoria was unlike anything Mia had ever seen. The planet's surface glowed with the light of molten crystal rivers, their warmth casting an ethereal glow on the towering obsidian spires. The air shimmered faintly with heat, and dragons of every size and hue soared through the skies. Ember's wings twitched with anticipation as their ship descended into the heart of the capital city, Dracontal. Krasner guided Mia and Ember through the bustling streets, where Dracorians paused to stare at the pair. Their expressions were a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and hope. Whispers followed them as they approached the Grand Palace, a colossal structure carved from a single black mountain, adorned with veins of glowing crystal that pulsed like a living heart. "The council awaits," Krasner said, leading them into a cavernous chamber filled with towering dragons, their scales reflecting the flames of massive braziers. At the center of the chamber sat the throne of scales, a massive seat forged from the bones of ancient dragons and inlaid with shimmering crystals. It glowed faintly, as though awaiting its true master. A hush fell over the room as Krasner stepped forward. "Council of Dracoria, I present to you the lost prince, Ember." Mia stood frozen as every eye turned to her and Ember. The dragons whispered among themselves, their voices low and rumbling. A particularly large and imposing dragon with emerald-green scales stepped forward. "This runt is the lost prince," he growled, his voice dripping with disdain. "He is unworthy of the throne. Let him prove himself, or send him back to the stars." Krasner bowed his head. "He will face the trials, as is tradition." Mia clenched her fists. "What are these trials?" The green dragon sneered. 3 tests to prove his lineage, strength, and worth. The first is the trial of fire. Only a true prince can wield the flames of eternity. The trial of fire. Mia and Ember were led to the volcanic forge, a massive pit where rivers of molten crystal converged. The task was simple in theory. Ember had to ignite the flames of eternity, an ancient fire said to burn brighter than any other. Dozens of dragons surrounded the pit, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. Ember hesitated as he approached the forge's edge, the heat causing his scales to shimmer. Mia knelt beside him, her voice steady. "You can do this, Ember. I believe in you." Ember let out a low growl and stepped forward. He spread his wings, inhaling deeply, and unleashed a stream of fire that mingled with the molten crystal. At first, nothing happened. The crowd murmured in disappointment. "Come on, Ember," Mia whispered, her voice urgent. "I know you're more than they think." Ember let out another roar, this one louder, fiercer. His flames turned golden, then white-hot, merging with the molten crystal until a brilliant fire erupted from the forge. The flames spiraled into the air, forming the shape of a dragon before settling into a steady, eternal glow. The crowd erupted into cheers, and even the skeptical green dragon nodded grudgingly. Ember had passed the first test. The trial of wisdom. The next day, Ember faced the Sphinx of Nebulon, a mysterious guardian who tested candidates with riddles and challenges of intellect. Mia stood at his side, her heart racing as the Sphinx, a shimmering creature with glowing eyes, posed its first riddle. I am always hungry, I must always be fed. The finger I touch will soon turn red. What am I? Ember tilted his head, and Mia whispered, fire. The answer is fire. Ember growled softly, and the Sphinx nodded. Correct. The riddles grew harder, and the final challenge required Ember to navigate a maze of illusions, uncovering the truth hidden within. With Mia's encouragement, Ember relied on his instincts, finding the path forward and earning the Sphinx's approval. The trial of leadership. The final trial was the most dangerous, a battle against a rogue faction of space pirates who had invaded Dracorian territory. Ember was tasked with leading a battalion of young dragons to reclaim their land. Mia rode on Ember's back as they soared into battle, her heart pounding. The sky was filled with flashes of light and the deafening roar of combat. Ember unleashed streams of fire, coordinating with the other dragons to outmaneuver the pirates. Mia shouted commands, her bond with Ember allowing her to anticipate his moves. By the end of the battle, the pirates were defeated, their ships reduced to smoldering wreckage. Ember's leadership and bravery had rallied the young dragons, proving his worth as a leader. Claiming the throne. As they returned to the palace, the Council of Dracoria assembled once more. Ember stepped forward, his head held high, and approached the throne of scales. The massive seat began to glow as he neared, its light growing brighter until it enveloped him completely. When the light faded, Ember stood taller, his scales shimmering with newfound power. The council bowed, and the green dragon who had doubted him now spoke with reverence. All hail Ember, Prince of Dracoria, rightful heir to the throne. Mia wiped a tear from her cheek as Ember roared triumphantly, his voice echoing through the chamber. She knew their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, both for Dracoria and the galaxy, but in that moment, she was filled with pride and hope. As Ember settled onto the throne, he turned his gaze to Mia, his closest companion. The bond they had forged would shape not only Dracoria but the stars themselves. And as the dragons cheered and the skies of Dracoria lit up with fireworks, Mia smiled, knowing she and Ember had found their place in the galaxy. Together, they would change the future.